You're standing in the hallway of an old house. The wedding is still going on in the rooms behind you. You can hear it through the walls: music, laughter, chairs scraping across the floor, somebody calling out for another bottle, somebody else telling the children to stay out from underfoot. Up in the attic, there's an old chest against the wall. Dark wood, heavy lid, iron hasps. The kind of thing people stop noticing after it has sat there in the same place long enough. Someone tells you it has always been there. But in an old house, that usually means nobody remembers who put it there first. Then someone mentions the bride. That's how the story begins. With just a wedding, a crowded house, and a bride who was there just a moment ago. She was still in her dress, still flushed from dancing, still laughing because the whole house was laughing. Then someone suggested a game of hide and seek. And in a house full of side rooms, curtains, closets, staircases, and old furniture, that probably sounds harmless enough. At first, nobody worried about it. They called her name like it was part of the game. Then they called louder. Then the groom started opening doors. By morning, the candles had burned low. The food had gone cold. The flowers were starting to wilt. The wedding guests had searched every bedroom, the garden, the road, the outbuildings, every place a living bride should have been able to answer back to them. But she was gone. Years passed. The house kept standing. Generations changed within it. Furniture got moved. People who remembered the wedding grew old. The missing bride became the kind of story people told quietly when someone asked about the old chest in the attic. The chest stayed where it was. Sometimes linens got stacked on top of its heavy lid. Maybe children were told to leave it alone. Maybe everybody forgot where the key went. After a while, old furniture has become a part of a house, even when nobody living knows what it holds. Then one day, someone opened it. The iron gave, the lid came up, and inside the chest was the bride, or what was left of her, still in the wedding clothes she wore when the house was full of music. That story is called the Mistletoe Bride, or Mistletoe Bow, and it has been attached to more than just one old house. The names change, the houses change, but the basic fear stays the same. The bride never made it out of the wedding day. The wedding house held on to her. And once you understand that, a lot of old wedding lore starts to sound less like decoration and more like a warning. A wedding was supposed to move someone safely from one life into another, one house to the next, one name, one bed, one future into another. But in stories like this, the crossing fails. The bride doesn't reach the new life. The house becomes the place where the wedding stopped. I'm Papa G, and this is the Feral Folklorist. And today we're talking about ghost brides, wedding curses, and the old belief that marriage was a crossing. One people protected with veils and vows, colors and charms, and warnings, because they knew not every wedding carried only joy. To understand ghost bride stories, you have to understand how seriously people once took the wedding day. Today, a lot of wedding customs get treated like pretty leftovers. The veil is pretty, and the flowers are pretty. The rhyme about something old and something blue is sweet. The bride's color is a matter of taste. The ring is sentimental, and the procession is a photo opportunity. Older folklore didn't look at it that way. A wedding was one of the biggest public crossings most people made in ordinary life. A person could leave one household and enter another. A bride might change her name, her room, her bed, her duties, her place at the table, and the family she was expected to answer to. A groom took on obligations too, but in a lot of older wedding lore, the bride is the one most people watch closely because she's the one being displayed, moved, praised, judged, envied, and handed from one house into another. And that much attention can feel a little bit pressured, stressed, and sometimes dangerous. You can see that fear in the veil. A veil isn't only about romance. In older wedding belief, it could work like a cover. The bride's face was the center of attention that day, and attention was not always understood as harmless. Too much admiration could turn into envy. Too much envy could become the evil eye. And too many eyes on the bride could make her vulnerable at the very moment everyone was supposed to be blessing her. So the face was covered. That gives the veil a different feeling. It's not simply a piece of cloth, it is a screen between the bride and all the eyes in the room. It lets her move through ceremony without being fully exposed to every glance and every thought, every whispered judgment, and every bit of envy sitting underneath someone else's smile. Now, some Jewish wedding customs carry that same nervousness around the eye. The bride and groom are often understood as especially visible on the wedding day, and some traditions explain coverings and markings and other ritual acts as a way to protect the couple from jealousy or the evil eye or spiritual interference. That tells you something important. A joyful day was also a vulnerable day. Happiness attracted attention, and attention sometimes had to be managed. The same thinking sits behind bridal attendants. Bridesmaids are often explained as companions, helpers, or decoys. The old idea was that if several women were dressed alike or moving with the bride, harmful spirits, ill wishes, or envious attention might be confused long enough for the ceremony to pass safely. Whether every version of that explanation is historically tidy, it's less important than the fear it preserves. The bride was worth guarding. Now, noise mattered too. Bells, shouting, music, clattering dishes, there's a loud celebration going on, and it may all sound like ordinary wedding joy. But loud sound had a long life in protective customs. Noise breaks up the air, it drives off what is lurking too close, and it announces that the couple is surrounded by witnesses. A wedding procession moving with sound is harder to treat like a quiet, private target. And that is the one reason why the road to the wedding mattered so much. The bride simply did not appear at the ceremony. She had to be taken there, escorted there. So she would often cross roads, thresholds, maybe bridges, church doors, yard gates, crossing over water. Every one of those places could feel like a point where trouble might grab hold of her. The road to the wedding is where the bride is between houses, and she's between names, meaning her last name. She's going to change her last name. And she's between one life and the next. That makes the procession protective as much as decorative. It surrounds the couple while they move through the risky part. The old rhyme about something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, it belongs here too. People often repeat it now because it sounds traditional. But the older logic is practical. Something old ties the bride to continuity and family memory. Now, something new opens the door to the life ahead. Something borrowed is often understood as borrowed good fortune, ideally from a woman whose marriage or fertility was considered blessed. So you would often borrow something from a married woman who was a mother. And something blue has been tied to fidelity, purity, and protection. Think of the blue evil eye. You place the things on the bride's body, and she carries those meanings into marriage. The new object opens the road. The old object steadies things. The borrowed object lends luck from another household, and the blue object guards and blesses. It's small work, but wedding customs are full of small work because the day itself is too big to handle all at once. Now, colors, they had their own warnings. That is where the old wedding color rhyme comes in. One version gives white a favorable meaning, blue a faithful one, black a regretful one, and red the sharpest warning of all. Married in red, you'll wish yourself dead. That line survives because it's blunt enough to remember. Red could mean passion, or anger, or heat, or blood, or danger and desire, or a marriage entering into the world under stress and strain. In some traditions, red protects, but in this rhyme, it warns. That's the important part. The same color can do different work depending on where it sits and what the custom says it is doing. A red thread tucked away for protection is one thing. A whole marriage under the sign of red is another. Old magic is often picky like that. Placement matters, purpose matters, who gave the object matters, and who sees it matters. Rings carried another kind of pressure because a ring makes the promise visible. It circles the finger and it marks the body. It tells everyone that words have been spoken and a bond has been made. That is why ring superstitions are still so common. Losing the ring, dropping it, putting it on too early, or playing with it carelessly all feel dangerous in wedding lore, because the ring is the part of the vow people can touch. And when people believe an object seals a promise, they treat mistakes around that object as signs. That's the plain logic behind so many wedding warnings. Don't drop the ring, don't mishandle the dress, don't let the bride be seen too soon. Don't let her leave uncovered if old superstition says she needs covering. And don't start the day with the wrong road, the wrong color, the wrong word, or the wrong omen if you can help it. Those rules may sound fussy when they're pulled apart one by one, but together they make up an entire system. Cover the bride, guard the road, watch the ring, mind your colors, carry luck on the body, surround the couple with witnesses, and make noise if something needs driving off. And that's how people try to get a wedding safely across the threshold. And this is where ghost bride stories start making more sense. A ghost bride is not only a dead woman in a wedding dress. She is what happens when the wedding does not complete its work. The bride never reaches the new house. The vow is spoken to the wrong person. Maybe the family forces a match that should have never been made. The bridal garment holds death instead of a blessing. The ring binds where it should have been left alone. The old customs were there to keep the wedding moving in the right direction. The ghost stories tell us what people feared would happen when it did not. A wedding has two jobs in old folk belief. It protects the crossing and it makes the bond. That is the simple way to understand the customs around the veil and the ring and the dress and the witnesses and the words spoken over the couple. The wedding day is full of small actions because the thing being done is so large. A person is being moved from one state into another, one house into another, really one public identity into another. And people did not always trust a change like that to happen safely on its own. It needed some help. So that's why we say the bride is covered and surrounded, and you watch over the ring and you speak in front of witnesses. All of that is wedding magic, even when people no longer call it magic. It's the work of getting a person safely across a tricky moment and making sure the new bond settles where it should. And that's why wedding objects carry so much weight in these stories. A dress is not just clothing in this kind of lore. It touches the bride while she's being changed in public. It holds her perfume, her sweat, her body temperature, but also inside all her fears and hopes and stress of the day. If the marriage is happy, the dress becomes a blessed object. It may be saved because it carries memories in a good way. But if the wedding is forced, or grief struck, or cut short by a death, the dress can become the thing people were afraid to open, or to wear, or to sell, or to even pass down. The same principle applies to the veil. Now, we already talked about the protective side of it, so I won't drag that out again. But the plain point is the veil sits between the bride and the eyes on her, gives her cover at the exact moment she is the most visible. When the covering works, it protects the crossing. When the wedding itself is wrong, the veil becomes one more object that remembers how exposed she was. Now, the ring works in a different sort of way. A ring circles the finger. It gives the vow a shape that stays on the body after the ceremony ends. That's why people get nervous around wedding rings in folklore. The ring is the promise made visible. It could be lost, dropped, or stolen, or hidden, or inherited, or thrown away, or given to the wrong person. Every one of these actions feels important because the ring is treated like more than jewelry. It's a claim. That is the terror in the old corpse bride tale, often called the finger. A groom-to-be finds a dead woman's finger sticking up out of the ground. His friends push him to make a joke out of it, so he slips his wedding ring onto the corpse's finger and speaks the marriage words as if he were marrying her. Then the dead woman claims him. That story is frightening because the groom did the work without respecting the work. He used the ring, he said the words, he treated a marriage speech like a joke because the listener was dead. But the dead bride answered as though the vow had been real all along. So don't put the ring where it doesn't belong. Don't say wedding words if you don't mean to bind something. And don't play with the dead and then act surprised when the dead take you seriously. Now, whether that story is true or not, nobody knows, but it makes a pretty good tale. The same seriousness appears in another way in ghost marriage customs. In some Chinese traditions, marriage could be arranged for someone who died unmarried. The reasons vary, and the practice should be treated with respect instead of turned into a spooky novelty. But it belongs in this episode because it shows how strongly marriage can be tied to order, to family placement, and to rest. In that kind of thinking, the dying unmarried may leave a person unsettled or improperly placed within the family line. Marriage becomes a way of giving the dead a relationship, a household position, or a place in someone's memory. That is very different from corpse bride tales, but both stories agree on one thing. Marriage does not always stop at death. That is why ghost bride lore has so much power. The bride is not only a pretty figure in white or red, she's a sign that something about the marriage did not complete. Maybe the road never led her to the church. Maybe the house did not release her like in our first story. The family may have forced this marriage and it was an unhappy one, so the ring was given wrongly, and the vow was spoken where it shouldn't have been. The dress kept the shape of life that never moved forward. So that brings us into the forced wedding. A wedding can bless and protect, settle down a household, but it can be used badly too. Families have used marriage to fix scandals, or secure money, or join property, maybe to silence a daughter, or erase an old attachment. It could be to force respectability over a situation that had gone wrong. Think of shotgun weddings. In those stories, the curse does not always come from a witch standing outside the church. Sometimes the curse is the wedding being pushed forward when everyone can feel it should stop. That is why the story of Janet Dalrymple, later connected to the Bride of Lammermoor, fits this example so well. The horror is not only the blood in the bridal chamber, it is the pressure before the chamber door ever closes. The bride is being moved into marriage her heart already rejected. The wedding is made public and proper and respectable, but the bond underneath it is wrong. Then the bridal chamber becomes the place where the truth breaks through. A wedding that begins by silencing someone may not stay silent. A vow forced over grief or fear or another promise may not hold the way the family wants it to hold. So a wedding object from that kind of day can carry more than just pretty lace and family history. This is where people should be careful with inherited wedding things. There could be a ring from a long, loving marriage, and it can feel like a charm of endurance, or a veil from a beloved grandmother can feel very protective. A dress kept from a happy marriage can carry a blessing with it. But a dress from a forced marriage, or a ring from a violent household, or a bouquet saved from a wedding that was followed by an early death. Old folk practice understood contact. Something borrowed could bring luck because it had touched another woman's blessed marriage. By the same logic, something kept from a bitter marriage may carry some of that bitterness forward. That does not mean the object is cursed in a dramatic storybook sense. It means objects have histories, and some histories need settling before they can be worn or displayed or passed on to another bride. So the plain rule is this: wedding objects and wedding words are not empty things. We've talked about how the veil covers and protects, and the ring seals. The dress carries contact from the bride, and the vow makes a claim. When the wedding is willing and blessed and properly settled, those things help carry the couple into the next part of life. But when the vow is mocked or forced or broken or sometimes spoken too close to the graveyard, the same objects can still start carrying trouble. That's when the ring becomes a claim. And we have the road or the room it happened in or the house it happened in. That becomes the thing people remember when wedding folklore crosses into ghost bride folklore. The customs tell us how people tried to protect the marriage in the beginning. The ghost stories tell us what people feared would happen when that protection failed. The part that keeps ghost bride stories alive is what happens after the wedding fails. The wedding day is supposed to turn into a happy married life, but in these stories, it turns into more of a eerie tale. That is why a missing bride can change an entire household. In the Mistletoe Bride story from the opening, the horror is not only that she died in a chest, it's that the house keeps going on around her. People eat there and they sleep there. They raise their children there. And the chest still sits in the attic, shut. And the story waits inside it. And once the bride is found, the entire vibe of the house changes. Bride's Pool gives us a different kind of ghost bride story because this one moves outside of the house and onto the road. Now, Bride's Pool is a waterfall and a pool in Hong Kong's new territories, and the legend attached to it is simple and pretty sad. A bride was being carried to her wedding in a ceremonial chair. Now, the weather was bad and the path was slick, and as the procession moved near the water's edge, one of the men carrying her slipped. The chair overturned and the bride fell into the pool. In some tellings, her heavy wedding clothes pulled her under before anyone could save her. That's why the place is called Bride's Pool. So once you know that story, the name changes the landscape. The pool is no longer a pretty place with water and stone. It becomes the spot where a wedding journey failed. The bride is being carried from one household towards another, from one life to the next, and she never arrived. That is what makes the legend work. Folklorically speaking, a wedding procession is supposed to deliver the bride safely. It's supposed to surround her and protect her and carry her through the risky part of the crossing. But in this story, the procession fails. The road does not bring her to her groom. The water takes her instead. So people remember the place through the bride. They remember the path and the slipping chair, the red wedding clothes she wore because that was the custom, the water, and the life she never reached. That is enough to make a landscape feel haunted, even before anyone says anything about seeing a ghost. Now, back to Janet Dalrymple. It gives us a different kind of afterlife. Her story does not survive because people saw a woman walking by a pool or heard a chest open in the dark. It survives because the wedding itself became a wound in family memory. A bride is pressed into marriage she does not want, and the ceremony goes forward, and the house gets its public respectability for one evening. That is why her story kept moving. It became the ground under the Bride of Lammermoor. It became part of the larger cultural memory around forced marriages and broken promises and women pushed into family engagements that look proper from the outside, but brutal from within. That kind of wedding curse does not need a spooky setting to make it as bad as it was. It has the table set, the guests gathered, the family all satisfied, and the bride going silent because her will has already been treated as the least important thing in the room. A forced wedding can be dressed beautifully and still be wrong. A family can call something respectable, while the person at the center of it is being crushed by it. And folklore remembers that. Literature remembers it. Opera, it demonstrates it. The details may change, but the story pretty much stays the same. A bad wedding can leave behind more than embarrassment or sorrow. It can leave behind an object no one wants to touch, or a room with a bad reputation now, a dress with a story, a road people don't want to travel on, or something the family is really silent about. It could even be a piece of jewelry that feels wrong when you hold it now. The ghost bride gathers all of that into one figure. Instead of saying all that directly, the story gives you things like a bride trapped in a chest, or a bride by the water, or maybe a ghostly bride in the window. That is what ghost bride stories give people, a way to talk about what went wrong after everyone else had tried to move on. These stories let families and communities say things that may have been too painful or too shameful to say plainly, so they turn them into a story to tell. That is why the ghost bride keeps coming back in folklore. She gives the story a body, a main character. She stands in for the woman who might have been lost or silenced or forced into something or hidden away or carried towards a life that she never wanted. So when old wedding customs warn people to cover the bride up and guard the road she traveled on and respect all the objects that touch that marriage, those customs belong to a serious view of weddings. A wedding could bless a house, but it could also bring it grief. Because if everyone in the room can feel that the wedding is wrong, you can't pretend it's not just by dressing it up with bouquets of flowers and people in pretty dresses. So most people listening to this are not going to find a bride in an old trunk or see a woman in red standing beside the water. But plenty of people have wedding objects in the family that feel kind of heavier than they should. A dress in a box or a veil wrapped in tissue or a ring nobody wears or passes down. It might be a wedding photograph turned face down in a drawer. or dried flowers from a marriage nobody talks about kindly. A piece of bridal jewelry passed down with a story that always gets sort of quiet at the end. So here's the house rule: don't treat a wedding object like empty decoration until you know what story it's carrying with it. Don't assume it is joyful and something that you should use in your wedding, unless you know the story that goes behind it. Now, that doesn't mean every old wedding dress is haunted. It means wedding objects sit close to promises. They sit really close to the pressures that the family put onto the bride and groom. Without you knowing it, they could hold on to grief and pride and betrayal, or it could hold on to blessings and joy. Before you wear it, display it, or sell it, or use it in spell work, or pass it on to another bride, especially, take a minute and ask what it is. Was it kept with love, or was it kept out of duty? Was it hidden because it hurt to look at it? Did the marriage bring the people peace, or leave a bad taste in their mouth when they talk about it? Before using it or passing it on, you have to know, did the person choose that marriage freely? Was there maybe betrayal later in the marriage, or was it a happy one? Was it a forced marriage? Was it something one of them wanted and the other one didn't, so there were years of hidden resentment? You may not know every answer. That's fine, but you can still stop treating the object like it has no history. You need to do a little bit of research before you use it for magical purposes. Now, for this working, choose one wedding object that needs settling down: a dress or a veil or a bouquet or pressed flowers or just a photograph. It might be an invitation, maybe a handkerchief, a piece of jewelry, like we said, or maybe a simple ribbon that was used in the ceremony. Maybe it was tied around a bouquet. If the object is too delicate to handle, use a photograph of it or write what it is out on paper. So, what you need is the wedding object or the photograph of it, a clean table or clear surface, some brown or white paper, a pencil, a piece of clean cloth for wrapping, a small box or an envelope, or something for storage for afterwards. And you might put in rosemary or lavender or bay or cedar, which is for peaceful keeping. And you start by putting the object on the table. Don't decorate around it. Don't turn it into a shrine. Just place it where you can look at it clearly. Then say what it is. This is my grandmother's veil, for example, or this is the ring from a marriage that broke. This is the photograph from a wedding nobody talks about. Keep it plain. The truth doesn't need to be dressed up. Just say truthfully what it is. Now take the paper and write 3 short lines. First, write what the object is. Second, write what you know about the story. And third, write what you are deciding to do with it now. For example, it could be, this is the veil from Aunt Margaret's wedding. Her marriage was hard. Nobody in the family speaks of it plainly. I will not pass this veil forward as a blessing until the story is told honestly. Or it could be, this ring came from a long marriage with love in it. I receive the blessing, but I do not take on the burdens that belong to them. The ring may remain in the family with peace. Here's another one, just so you get the gist of it. This dress carries sorrow, silence, or stress. I will not ask another bride to wear it. The object is retired from use. So that word matters, retired. Some objects don't have to be destroyed or cleansed. Some simply need to be retired from active use. They can be kept as history without being used by someone else or worn as a blessing. So when you've written these 3 lines, read them out loud once. Then place the paper beneath the object and let it sit there for a few minutes. This is not about making the object magical. It's about making the story around it an honest one. After that, decide which of 3 paths the object belongs to. Is it a blessing object, Then you wrap it cleanly and label it. Write down whose it was and what the blessing it carries, so don't leave the next person who finds it guessing. If it is a grief object, wrap it in cloth and place it somewhere quiet. Keep it out of bedrooms, away from altars, daily living spaces. Grief objects need respect, but they do not need to sit where they keep pulling onto the living of everyday people. Now, if it's a troubled object, stop passing it forward as a romantic thing. Put that in writing. Yes, this was used in a wedding, but if you keep it for family historical purposes, but not for use as luck to a bride. Don't make it into something old or the something borrowed. If you do remove it, do it responsibly. Donate only what feels clean enough to pass on. Burn only what feels safe to burn. And bury only what is safe and legal to bury. So if objects belong to someone else or has historical value, don't destroy it just because it makes you uncomfortable. Once that decision is made, fold the paper and keep it with the object. That's the important part. The object should not go back into silence. If someone finds it years from now, they should know what it is, why it was kept, or why it was retired or blessed or removed from use. That's how you stop a wedding object from becoming a family ghost or a family curse. You tell the truth before the object has to tell you. So that's the rule. A wedding object deserves a true history. If it carries blessings, honor it. If it carries grief, give it a quiet place to grieve. If it carries harm, you don't want to hand that harm to the next person and call it tradition. Because a wedding dress is never just fabric when a family has been whispering about it for 50 years. A ring is never just metal when everyone knows why nobody wore it. And a bride's story should not have to haunt the house just because the living are too uncomfortable to tell the truth. I'm Papa G, and this has been the Feral Folklorist. Next time, we're talking about the devil's handprint and the old belief that some places can be marked by evil or fear or judgment or protection and never quite lose that sign. Until then, if you're planning a wedding, mind what you keep and mind what you pass down. And if an old wedding object feels heavy in your hands, don't pretend it's nothing. If you'd like to hear the after the show episode where I go deeper into the folklore, spill a little extra dirt, and sometimes rant just a bit, consider becoming a patron over on my Patreon at patreon.com/PapaG. You can find the official site for the podcast at feralfolklorist.com. And if you need spell supplies for any of the workings we talk about on the show, our metaphysical shop, Aromagees Botanica, has been weaving magic for over 25 years. That's over at aromagees.com.